Back here on HQ, we have some injury updates for you here on a Friday. Cowboys receiver CeeDee Lamb has cleared concussion protocol and is expected to play against the Vikings. Lamb suffered the concussion in last Thursday's loss to the Lions. His return will be a big boost for a Cowboys team who is struggling the Eagles, and they trail the Eagles by a game and a half in the NFC East. All right, so what does this mean for your fantasy team? Let's bring in our fantasy expert, Heath Cummings, who, by the way, have to get this out of the way. Heath and I are facing one another in our league this week, so there will be no personal questions. That is completely off the table. Let's get to CeeDee Lamb, who I happen to have on said roster, but I won't ask any questions. CeeDee coming off of the concussion protocol here, or clearing protocol, I should say. Where does he stack up for you? Because obviously, if you have CeeDee, you're going to start him.
Yeah, he's a top 12 wide receiver. George Pickens right there with him. Dak Prescott, a top 5 quarterback. Listen, this is not a good matchup. The Vikings have been on a hot streak defensively. They've been shutting down quarterbacks and wide receivers alike. But we've kind of seen this with the Cowboys already this year. Early in the year, they were playing the Packers when the Packers defense was on fire. And you know what Dallas did? They went and scored 40 points. They scored 24 against the Broncos. They scored 24 against the Eagles. They scored 30 last week against the Lions. I think you just have to start your Cowboys and know that, unfortunately, Jacqueline, you may be disappointed.
It feels like you're trying to maybe speak that into existence for me. I'm picking up what you're putting down. We see the wide receiver rankings here and want to transition into talking about Josh Jacobs, though, because the Packers are listing him as questionable for that big game against the Broncos. So for fantasy managers that have him, how do you handle this situation, Heath?
I think you view him as an RB2. You go make sure that Emmanuel Wilson is rostered. We are expecting at this time for Josh Jacobs to play, but he's been battling this knee injury for most of the last month. It kind of locked up on him a little bit last week, it sounds like. That is a risk in this game. What's also a risk is you're playing the Broncos. Your team just may not score that many points. Broncos fantastic in terms of dealing with running backs in the passing game, and Jacobs' work there has been sporadic at best. So I would not expect a lot in terms of catching the ball. This game only has an over-under of 42.5, so you maybe not getting a lot in terms of scoring either. But if Jacobs is active, you start him as an RB2. If Jacobs is out, you start an Emmanuel Wilson as an RB2. Wilson would be just a little bit lower than Jacobs, but still pretty close to a must-start running back.
All right, if we go to Chicago, the Bears are listing Rome Odunze as questionable for that matchup against the Browns. So if you got Rome Odunze, what do you do?
You know, it's funny. All these guys playing against very good defenses. The Cleveland Browns didn't look very good last week against the Titans, but we still know they're very talented. I think this one's a little bit tougher. Rome Odunze, if he plays, comes in about wide receiver 25 for me. He's been the clear top target for Caleb Williams most weeks when he's been healthy, but he is coming off of an injury, trying to play through something. And this does kind of profile as another low scoring game in absolutely frigid conditions. So I would view Odunze as kind of a boom bust number 3 wide receiver. Luther Burden is the guy who's impacted most if he comes back. I had him around wide receiver 28 without Odunze, closer to wide receiver 36 with Odunze. Also a small ding for Colston Loveland, who was a borderline top 12 tight end. I moved him behind Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely with the idea that Odunze would play. I think DJ Moore falls, but he was already so low that nobody wanted to start him anyway.
All right, we have a huge matchup on CBS with the Chiefs and the Chargers. I know you know all about it, Heath. And there's unfortunately some key starters on the O-line that are going to be out for the Chiefs in this matchup. So in terms of protecting Patrick Mahomes and what that means for Patrick Mahomes in terms of your quarterback rankings, where are you at on that situation?
You know, it's funny because they had a lot of these problems last week against the Texans, and for everything that went wrong for the Chiefs in that game, pass protection wasn't really one of them. So I think that the backups seem to be doing an okay job here. It's not a must-sit situation for Patrick Mahomes. I would start Jackson Dart over Mahomes. I would start Drake May over Mahomes. But another guy we've been having a lot of trouble with is Jacoby Brissett because he has to face Houston, the team that held Mahomes to single digits last week. I would still start Mahomes over Jacoby Brissett. Rashee Rice remains pretty close to a must-start wide receiver. I think you're still starting Travis Kelce, and you're basically living on a prayer if you're starting Xavier Woods.
All right, over to the Eagles and the Raiders. A lot of stuff happening here. So the Eagles, on that side of things, they're going to be without Lane Johnson and Jalen Carter, which you would think might be a boost for this Raiders offense. But now we know that it is Kenny Pickett who is going to be starting. So with all of that information, what does that mean, especially on the Kenny Pickett side of things? How much of a downgrade is that for guys like Brock Bowers?
Yeah, against the Raiders, I'm still starting Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Dallas Goedert's kind of in that same range that we just talked about with Colston Loveland. I hope you don't have to start him. The Raiders side is a little bit more interesting. I'm going to stick with Ashton Genty in full PPR leagues only. We saw the pass game work kind of disappear last week. The Eagles have given up the 5th most receiving yards to opposing running backs, and Genty had 8 targets in each of his 3 prior games. So I would still view Genty as a starter. It's a small downgrade for Brock Bowers with Kenny Pickett playing quarterback, but with Bowers' talent and the nature of the tight end position, I think you are still starting him. I would have started Kyle Pitts over him. I hope you did. I would start Harold Fannin over him, but for me, he's still a top 7 tight end. Dave and Jamie still have him in the top 3, I believe. You're probably sticking with Bowers. I really don't think you want to start a Raiders wide receiver.
Oh boy, if you had Kyle Pitts, I pray that you started him. He was on my fiance's bench, and I was never hearing the end of it last night. It was tough. Finally, want to go to the Texans, their backfield, because Nick Chubb and Woody Marks both popping up on the injury report. So how do we handle that Houston backfield?
I really want to start Woody Marks if he's active. Even with Nick Chubb healthy, it's been pretty consistent that it's upper teens in terms of touches for Woody Marks. This is a game where they are big favorites against Arizona. Arizona's given up 32 points per game to opposing running backs over their last 5 games. This should be a smash spot for Woody Marks as long as he plays. Honestly, Woody Marks managers hoping Nick Chubb is unable to play. If Chubb does play, it downgrades Marks just a little bit, but this backfield is his.
All right, Heath, no, this is typically the personal question time, but as we stated, no personal questions. Best of luck to you, my friend, and we will certainly, or at least I will certainly, update all of you on the outcome of my matchup with Heath Cummings. Wish me luck. You can hear Heath and the guys on the Fantasy Football Today podcast. They are always answering your fantasy questions, helping you win your league. You can watch right now by scanning that QR code on your screen.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights.
What a finish at the final round of play.
And in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
we're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
Find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.